Maya stood at the front gate with a small brass key resting in her palm, and the key felt too cold for a sunny day. The house in front of her looked older than her memories, with faded paint, tired wood, and a porch that leaned a little to the left. A soft wind moved through weeds in the yard, brushing against her legs like the place was trying to speak. She had expected a simple goodbye, a quick visit, a few papers to sign, and then a return to her busy life. Instead she was here, alone, holding the last thing her grandmother Rose had left to her. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, not openly staring, but still there, curious and quiet. To them Rose had been poor and ordinary, a woman who smiled a lot and asked for nothing. Maya had believed that story too, until the lawyer said, "Rose left you the house," and nothing else was explained. Maya opened the gate and walked up the cracked path, stepping around dead leaves and a broken flower pot. She remembered coming here as a child, when Rose would greet her with warm tea and plain bread, and act like it was a feast. Rose would tell gentle stories, never about herself, always about birds, rain, and small hopes that fit in a pocket. Maya had loved those visits, yet as she grew older, she visited less, and then almost not at all. Now regret came in waves, not dramatic, just heavy, like a coat she could not take off. She reached the front door and placed the key in the lock, and the lock turned with a stubborn click. The sound echoed through the porch, and for a moment Maya felt like she was opening something that should stay closed. She pushed the door slowly, expecting dust and emptiness, expecting the end of a simple life. Inside, the air smelled old but clean, like dried paper and soap, and the sunlight fell in thin bright stripes. The room was small, with a plain table, 2 chairs, and a narrow sofa covered with a quilt. Everything looked arranged with care, not fancy, but thoughtful, as if Rose wanted the place to feel calm for whoever came next. Maya walked in gently, almost like she might disturb the silence, and her shoes made soft sounds on the wooden floor. On the wall hung a single framed picture of a young woman, smiling in a serious way, hair pinned back, eyes steady. Maya leaned closer, and her throat tightened, because the face looked like Rose, but younger, stronger, almost unfamiliar. She realized she had never seen a photo of her grandmother as a young woman, not even once. That small frame, placed carefully at eye level, felt like the first clue in a puzzle she did not know existed. Maya moved toward the kitchen, expecting empty shelves, but she found jars lined up in perfect rows. Each jar had a neat label, not rushed, not messy, with dates and short notes like winter tea, lemon peel, last harvest. Her grandmother had always said she had nothing, yet the shelves showed patience, planning, and pride. On the counter sat a notebook, open to a page filled with lists, not grocery lists, but names and places and numbers written carefully. Maya did not understand the numbers, but she could tell they mattered, because the handwriting was steady and precise. She flipped a few pages and saw notes about repairs, roof work, taxes, and something that looked like rent records. Her stomach turned, because Rose had never mentioned collecting rent, and Rose had never seemed like someone with records like this. Maya closed the notebook and looked around, feeling the house shift in her mind from poor and small to secret and controlled. In the living room, Maya noticed one piece of furniture that did not match the rest, a tall wooden cabinet with clean polished edges. It looked newer and strangely untouched by dust, like someone had wiped it recently, or like it was protected by attention. The cabinet stood near the far wall, half hidden behind a curtain that did not belong in a small room. Maya pulled the curtain aside and saw the cabinet door had a small metal latch, simple but firm. Her hands hesitated, then she opened it, and the smell inside was different, like old envelopes and dry ink. Boxes were stacked neatly, each tied with string, each marked with dates in the same careful handwriting. Maya lifted the first box and felt its weight, not just physical but the weight of stored time. Her pulse quickened, because nothing about this felt like random clutter, this felt like a plan that had been waiting. She opened the box and found letters, many letters, bundled in groups, each group tied with ribbon. The handwriting was elegant and confident, not the quick rough notes Rose used on shopping lists. Maya read the first letter slowly, and her mind struggled to fit the words to the grandmother she knew. The letter spoke about land, boundaries, and an agreement made long ago, with a tone that sounded formal and careful. It mentioned a house, a trust, and a promise to keep something safe until the right person came. Maya swallowed hard as she read names that sounded important, names she had seen in town newspapers, names attached to large businesses. One line made her hold her breath, because it said, "Do not let them know you are the holder, not until the time is right." Maya looked up from the page, as if someone might hear the letter being read, and the quiet house felt suddenly alert. She opened the second bundle, and inside were papers folded sharply, stamped, signed, and dated. Some pages looked like old deeds, some looked like receipts, and some looked like letters from banks and offices. Rose had always said money was not for her, that she lived simply, that she did not need more than a warm blanket and a little food. Yet here were documents that hinted at accounts, property lines, and payments that had been made for years. Maya found a small envelope with her own name written on it, and the sight of her name made her fingers go numb. She did not open it yet, because she felt like the house was watching her choice, like the next step would change everything. Instead she set it carefully on the table, as if it might break, and she continued reading the older papers first. The more she read, the clearer it became. Rose was not only poor, Rose was hiding something on purpose. Maya sat down, staring at the envelope, hearing the faint sound of a clock ticking somewhere deeper in the house. She tried to remember every conversation she had ever had with Rose, every gentle smile, every calm sentence. Rose had warned her about pride, about people who take what they did not earn, about promises that cost a lifetime. Maya had assumed those were just old sayings, but now they sounded like instructions. She looked around again and noticed things she had missed, a loose floorboard near the cabinet, a tiny key hook behind the picture frame. She stood up and walked to the picture of young Rose, and behind the frame she found a thin metal key taped carefully to the back. Maya held that key and felt her skin prickle, because it meant the house had more locked places, more stored truths. She returned to the envelope on the table, took a slow breath, and finally broke the seal with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in Rose's familiar simple handwriting, warm but steady, like a hand on a shoulder. Rose told Maya that the house was never just a house, and that Rose had lived small so others would look away. Rose said she had carried a duty that was passed to her by someone who trusted her more than wealth ever could. Rose wrote that certain people had tried to claim what was not theirs, and that Rose chose to look harmless so she could protect it. Rose also wrote that Maya was chosen not because she was perfect, but because she was kind at heart, and because she could still learn. At the end, Rose asked Maya to open the locked room under the stairs, and to read the notebook marked with a red ribbon. Maya lowered the letter and felt tears rise, not from sadness alone, but from the shock of discovering her grandmother's hidden strength. She stood in the quiet room with 2 keys in her hand, and she realized the world thought Rose was poor. But Rose had been powerful in a quiet way, and now that power had found Maya, Maya stood near the narrow stairs with a small metal key resting against her fingers. The space beneath the stairs felt colder than the rest of the house, and the light did not reach it well. She knelt down slowly and brushed away dust from a low wooden door that blended into the wall. Her heart beat louder as she noticed faint marks around the lock showing it had been opened many times. This was not a forgotten space but a place used with care and intention. Maya slid the key into the lock and felt a gentle turn without resistance. When the door opened, a quiet breath of air escaped as if the room itself had been waiting. Inside, the small room shelves covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Each shelf held boxes wrapped in cloth papers tied with string and small wooden cases. A single lantern sat on the floor and Maya lit it to push back the shadows. The warm glow revealed labels written in Rose's handwriting, steady and clear. Some labels showed years, others showed short notes like trust files, safe copies, and final proof. Maya felt overwhelmed not by fear but by the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest. She stepped inside fully and closed the door behind her, feeling the house seal around the moment. On the center shelf sat a notebook marked with a red ribbon, just as Rose had written. Maya untied the ribbon carefully and opened the notebook from the first page. The writing was calm and thoughtful, explaining events slowly like Rose was speaking to her. Rose wrote about a time many years ago when powerful people tried to hide something valuable. It was not gold or jewels but land ownership connected to many homes and families. The land had been promised to protect people like Rose who lived quietly and honestly. When greed grew strong, Rose was chosen to guard the truth by appearing small and harmless. Maya read page after page, learning how Rose accepted the duty without complaint. Rose moved into the old house and lived simply so no one would question her place. She kept records, quietly paid fees on time, and stored proof where it could not be taken. The notebook explained how others tried to pressure her through letters and false claims. Rose never argued loudly and never drew attention to herself. She waited patiently, knowing time would reveal lies and protect the truth. Maya felt a deep respect rise inside her, realizing strength could exist without noise. As Maya continued reading, she found maps folded carefully between pages. The maps showed property lines and names written small along the edges. Many houses in town stood on land connected to the same agreement. Maya recognized some names from shops, schools, and buildings she passed every day. The idea that her grandmother quietly protected so many lives felt unreal. Rose had carried this alone while the world saw her as poor and weak. Maya closed her eyes briefly, feeling tears form, but she held them back. A soft sound came from above, making Maya freeze in place. The floor creaked lightly as if someone had stepped near the stairs. Maya listened closely, holding her breath, and the house grew still again. She reminded herself she was alone, yet the feeling of being watched stayed. Rose had written about people who might come if they sensed change. Maya realized inheriting the house also meant inheriting attention. She knew she had to be careful from this moment forward. Maya gathered the notebook and a few important folders, placing them back carefully. She locked the room again, hiding the key in her pocket. As she stood up, she noticed the house felt different, less quiet, more awake. She walked through each room, slowly seeing new meaning in simple objects. Every chair, shelf, and wall now felt like part of a long, silent effort. Maya understood Rose had trusted her not just with truth but with timing. Nothing should be rushed and nothing should be revealed without purpose. That evening Maya sat at the table, watching light fade through the window. The envelope with her name lay open beside her, and the letter rested near her hand. Rose's words echoed in her thoughts, reminding her to stay calm and kind. Maya made a quiet promise to honor that advice no matter what followed. She knew people would come, questions would rise, and pressure would grow. But she also knew she was no longer just a visitor in this house. She was the next keeper of a story that was far from finished. Morning arrived quietly, and soft light filled the house through thin curtains. Maya woke on the narrow bed, feeling like she had not truly slept at all. Her mind stayed busy through the night, replaying every word Rose had written. She sat up slowly, listening to the familiar sounds of the old house settling. The place no longer felt empty but full of quiet purpose and hidden memory. Maya washed her face and looked at her reflection, wondering how her life had shifted so fast. She was the same person yet carried something heavy and unseen. Maya decided to walk outside to clear her thoughts and stepped onto the porch. The street looked the same, yet her eyes noticed more than before. She saw neighbors talking softly and pausing when they noticed her. Their looks were not unfriendly, but curious, like something had already begun. Rose had always greeted everyone kindly without sharing much. Maya realized that silence itself had been a shield. She returned inside, knowing she must follow that example. Later that day, Maya visited the local records office, holding one folder from the cabinet. She dressed simply and spoke politely, asking only basic questions. The clerk checked the documents and looked surprised, then careful. Maya noticed how attitudes shifted when certain names appeared. People spoke slower and chose words more carefully around her. She understood now how information could change power without raising a voice. Maya left with copies and more questions than answers. As days passed, letters began arriving at the house, addressed to Maya. Some were friendly, offering help, advice, and meetings. Others were formal, asking about ownership and records. Maya read each one calmly, never answering too quickly. Rose had written patience was the strongest protection. Maya kept copies of everything, storing them just as carefully. The house felt like a quiet witness to each decision she made. One afternoon a man named Aaron visited the house, introducing himself politely. He said he knew Rose many years ago and wanted to express respect. Maya invited him to sit, but kept her tone neutral and observant. Aaron spoke carefully about old agreements and shared responsibility. His words sounded friendly yet measured like steps on thin ground. Maya listened without revealing what she knew. She remembered Rose's advice about listening more than speaking. After Aaron left, Maya reviewed her notes comparing dates and names. She realized some visitors might test her understanding. Rose had expected this and prepared her with records and guidance. Maya felt fear at times, but it never controlled her actions. Instead, she leaned into calm and quiet strength. She began to understand Rose not as fragile but deliberate. The house itself seemed to approve of her growing confidence. One evening Maya opened another box she had not touched before. Inside were journals written over decades filled with thoughts, not facts. Rose wrote about loneliness, about pretending weakness, and about waiting. She described nights of doubt and moments of courage unseen by anyone. Maya felt closer to her grandmother than ever before. She understood the cost of protecting others without praise. The journals gave her emotional strength beyond any document. As weeks went by, pressure increased gently but steadily. Meetings were suggested, favors were hinted, and patience was tested. Maya remained polite and distant, always referring back to records. She found power in clarity and consistency. People stopped pushing when they realized she was prepared. Rose's quiet plan was still working through Maya. The house remained unchanged outside while everything shifted within. Maya stood one night in the living room holding the old photo of young Rose. She spoke softly, thanking her for trust and guidance. The journey was not finished and the truth was not fully revealed. But Maya was ready now, grounded and aware. She placed the photo back on the wall with care. The legacy of a quiet, strong woman lived on. And the next chapter waited just ahead. The seasons slowly changed and the air around the house felt heavier with meaning. Maya woke each morning with a clear plan, even when the path ahead stayed uncertain. She spent hours reading old files and journals, learning patterns and quiet lessons. Rose had not only kept records but had studied people and time. Maya noticed how pressure came in waves then faded when ignored. She learned when to wait and when to move forward. The house became both a shelter and a guide, shaping her choices. One afternoon Maya received an official notice requesting a public review meeting. The letter was polite but firm, asking her to attend and bring relevant documents. Maya did not panic, though her hands felt cold as she read it. Rose had written about moments like this where truth must step into light. Maya prepared carefully, selecting papers that told only part of the story. She chose calm honesty over dramatic defense. The night before the meeting she slept quietly, trusting preparation. The meeting hall was modest, filled with familiar faces and unfamiliar eyes. Maya walked in with steady steps, carrying a simple folder. She felt whispers move through the room like a soft breeze. Some people looked curious, others looked uneasy. Maya greeted everyone politely and took her seat. She remembered Rose saying dignity speaks louder than argument. The room slowly settled into attention. Questions came one by one, clear and controlled. Maya answered without haste, referring to records and dates. She avoided emotion and stayed with facts. When challenged, she asked for clarity rather than raising her voice. Her calm unsettled those who expected confusion. The meeting stretched on, but the tone shifted in her favor. Truth, when steady, proved difficult to shake. After the meeting, some people approached her with new respect. Others left quietly, avoiding eye contact. Maya understood that balance was changing. She returned home feeling tired but grounded. The house welcomed her back with familiar silence. She placed the folder back into the cabinet with care. Another step had been completed without force. That evening Maya opened a journal she had not read fully before. Rose had written about the final stage when protection becomes responsibility. She spoke about passing truth forward without creating fear. Rose believed safety came from shared knowledge, not secrecy forever. Maya realized her role was not to hide but to prepare. The idea felt large but not impossible. She was no longer alone in this task. Maya began reaching out carefully to a few trusted families. She shared limited information enough to create awareness. She avoided blame and focused on clarity. People listened because her tone carried respect. The quiet network Rose protected slowly strengthened. Support grew not through demand, but through understanding. Maya felt hope replace tension. One night Maya stood in the garden under a calm sky. She thought about the poor image people had of Rose. Now she saw her as rich in patience and wisdom. The house stood behind her unchanged yet powerful. Maya knew the final truth would soon surface. She felt ready, not rushed, and not afraid. The final part of the journey was close and waiting. The final weeks arrived quietly without warning or announcement. Maya felt the change not through letters or visits but through silence. The pressure that once hovered around the house slowly faded away. People who once questioned now waited. People who once tested now listened. The town moved forward with a calm understanding. Rose's long patience had reached its moment. Maya organized one last gathering, not large and not public. Only those directly connected to the land and records were invited. She chose the old community hall because it belonged to everyone. She arrived early, placing folders neatly on the table. Her hands were steady and her thoughts were clear. This was not about victory but completion. She carried Rose's legacy with quiet confidence. When the people arrived, Maya greeted them warmly. She spoke slowly, choosing words with care. She explained the history without blame or drama. She shared records openly, allowing everyone to see the truth. The room stayed silent, not from fear but from realization. People saw how close they had been to losing their homes. They also saw how one quiet woman had protected them. Maya spoke of Rose not as poor but as purposeful. She described her choice to live simply to protect others. The room filled with emotion held back by respect. Some people lowered their heads in gratitude. Others wiped their eyes quietly. No one interrupted because the story needed no defense. Truth stood firm on its own. The final documents were signed calmly without conflict. Ownership was secured and shared protection was established. No voices were raised and no anger remained. People thanked Maya, but she redirected that gratitude. She reminded them this was Rose's work, not hers. She was only continuing what had been trusted to her. The gathering ended without celebration but with peace. In the days that followed, the house became a place of visits and warmth. Neighbors stopped by not out of curiosity but appreciation. The garden was cleared and flowers returned slowly. Maya kept the house simple just as Rose had. She kept the cabinet locked, but the story was no longer hidden. The weight she carried felt lighter now. The house breathed easier, as if relieved. One afternoon Maya sat in the living room holding the old photo again. She smiled softly, seeing strength where she once saw fragility. Rose had lived quietly, but her impact was lasting. Maya felt proud not just of what was protected, but how. No force, no noise, and no pride had been needed. Only patience, kindness, and resolve. These were the real riches Rose left behind. As time passed, the town spoke of Rose differently. Not loudly, and not dramatically. They spoke with respect and understanding. Children learned her story as a lesson of quiet strength. Maya listened from a distance, never correcting or adding. She knew stories grow best when left to breathe. Rose's memory settled gently into the town heart. Maya chose to stay in the house not out of duty but connection. She continued her work while caring for the place. The cabinet remained a reminder, not a burden. She opened it less often but valued it more. The house no longer felt like a secret keeper. It felt like a shared promise fulfilled. Maya felt at home in every sense. One evening as the sun set, Maya stood on the porch. The air felt warm and calm, like a long-held breath released. She thought of how the world often mistakes quiet for weakness. Rose had proven otherwise through a lifetime of choice. Maya carried that lesson forward with grace. The house stood strong behind her, unchanged yet honored. And the story ended not with shock but with lasting respect.